There is a secret so strange, so simple, and yet so powerful that it governs the fate of nearly every human life. It's not hidden in some mountain temple or buried in ancient texts. It's not locked behind wealth or status or education. In fact, it's been in plain sight all along. The strangest secret is this: we become what we think about. That's it. That's the law. It sounds too simple, too obvious, too gentle to shape a destiny, but I assure you it is the master key. Everything you see in the world today was first a thought in someone's mind. Every building, every invention, every business, every relationship, every war, and every peace treaty all began with a single thought. And yet most people treat their thoughts like background noise, letting them drift, wander, and repeat, never realizing they are crafting their future with every single one. The mind is not a playground. It is a garden, and whether you know it or not, you are planting seeds right now. You see, the human mind does not discriminate. It does not ask if the thought is helpful, if it's worthy, if it's aligned with your highest self. It simply takes the most dominant thoughts, especially those repeated with emotion, and begins to bring them to life. Slowly, quietly, relentlessly, and this is why the strangest secret is also the most dangerous. Because just as surely as your thoughts can build fortune, they can also build failure. Just as easily as they can attract wealth, they can attract poverty. Not just in your wallet, but in your thinking, your relationships, your health, and your purpose. Most people live with no awareness of this principle, and so they fill their minds with doubt, fear, envy, blame, and then they're shocked when their life reflects it. But the one who understands, who really grasps the power of thought, gains an unfair advantage. They stop blaming the world and start programming the mind. They stop reacting and start creating. They become a conscious architect of reality. Let me ask you a question. If I handed you $1 million machine, precise, responsive, limitless, would you take care of it? Would you protect it from contamination, from bad programming, from misuse? Of course you would. And yet the machine between your ears is worth infinitely more, and most people fill it with noise, with garbage, with fear, with gossip. Your mind is your factory. It's where your life is built, and the product it produces is based on what you feed it. The strangest secret is not strange because it's hidden. It's strange because we ignore it. We treat it like a novelty instead of a law. But just like gravity, it doesn't care whether you understand it. It simply operates. You become what you think about. Whether that thought is noble or weak, focused or scattered, empowered or defeated, it will grow. Your job is not to hope for a good life. Your job is to control the seed. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most people don't think. Not really. They react. They repeat. They relive. They consume. But they don't think with intention. They don't take time every day to feed the mind with vision, with clarity, with identity. And so the world does it for them. Advertising does it, news does it, social media does it. And what does it feed? Fear, lack, comparison, division, small thinking. The man or woman destined for success does something radically different. They think deliberately. They choose their thoughts like a builder chooses materials, carefully, wisely, with the end result in mind. They do not let the world dictate their mental diet. They program their mind for fortune. And as surely as day follows night, the outer world follows the inner. Write this down. Your outer world is a reflection of your inner world, not a mirror of your intentions, but a mirror of your dominant thoughts. If you want to know what someone truly believes, look at their results. If you want to change your results, start with the root, the mind. But don't just affirm casually. Don't just journal once and expect the tide to turn. Think of your mind like a field. If you plant one seed and leave, weeds will take over. But if you plant daily, water daily, protect daily, you begin to see the signs, the first green shoots, the shift in confidence, the small wins, and with time, with faith, with consistency, a harvest comes. The harvest always comes. The only variable is what you planted, how often you watered, and whether you stuck with it long enough to see it bloom. Most people quit too soon. They start strong and then doubt sets in. But those who understand the law, who believe in the power of thought and act accordingly, they succeed. Always. I want to give you a picture. Picture a man walking through life with a projector in his mind. That projector casts images onto the screen of his life. If he fills it with fear, limitation, and doubt, his life will begin to reflect that fear. His opportunities will shrink. His relationships will suffer. His health will follow his stress. But if he fills that projector with vision, gratitude, clarity, and belief, the world responds in kind. People show up, doors open, energy returns. This is not magic, this is alignment. The law is working either way. The only question is, what are you projecting? Most don't realize they have the remote in their hand. They've been watching the wrong movie and blaming the screen, but once they wake up, once they realize the power they hold, they stop watching and start directing. And that's when life begins to change. You'll notice that those who live with intention seem to move through the world differently. They're calm yet driven, grateful yet hungry, focused but not frantic. They're not chasing things, they're attracting them. Why? Because they've done the work on the inside. They've impressed the vision deeply into their mind. They've repeated it until it's no longer a wish, it's a knowing. And when you operate from knowing, the world bends to meet you. Not immediately, not without resistance, but consistently, because energy follows thought, behavior follows belief, and fortune follows identity. That's the true power of the strangest secret. It doesn't just change what you get, it changes who you are, and who you are decides what stays. You may be wondering now, if it's this simple, why don't more people succeed? The answer is just as simple, because simple isn't easy, because the law works quietly, because the harvest is delayed, and because most people are addicted to the short term. They want the fruit without planting the seed. They want the applause without the rehearsal. But the one who understands the secret accepts the delay. They trust the process. They plant daily. They tend to the soil. And they refuse to be fooled by the silence between effort and result. They know the law is at work. They know the universe rewards consistency. And they build their life the way one builds a cathedral, brick by brick, thought by thought, with faith in the invisible becoming visible. If you take nothing else from today, take this: your thoughts are not entertainment. They are instructions, they are blueprints, they are causes that will become effects. What you allow repeatedly into your mind will eventually shape your world. So guard it like a vault, direct it like a general, tend to it like a garden, and watch as your life begins to shift. This is the strangest secret that turns thought into fortune, and the moment you understand it, truly understand it, is the moment everything begins to change. Every morning, before the noise of the world comes rushing in, before the emails, the deadlines, the opinions, and the chaos, there is a window, a small sacred window of stillness. And what you do in that window can shape your entire day, your week, your year, your life. Most people miss it. They roll out of bed already behind, already scattered, already reacting. But the person who is serious about transforming their life uses this time with intention. They don't just wake up, they activate. And that activation begins with a phrase, a simple, powerful phrase that rewires the mind and reclaims the day. I am the architect of my reality. Say it again. Let it sink in, because it is not just a sentence. It is a command. It is a declaration. It is the beginning of a new identity. And if you repeat this phrase every morning and, more importantly, live it, you will see your life begin to change in ways that others will call impossible. I am the architect of my reality. Not my past, not my parents, not my circumstances, me. This phrase is not wishful thinking, it's a wake-up call. It reminds you daily that while you may not control every event, you always control your response. You always control your perspective. And over time, your perspective shapes your results. Your results shape your reality. The moment you internalize this, you move from victim to visionary. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for the world to change and begin changing your relationship to the world. The successful don't sit around hoping for better conditions. They build better systems. They construct habits that align with the life they want to live. And that construction begins not with tools or tactics, but with identity. The person who says, I am the architect, starts to design their life like a blueprint on purpose, with precision and without apology. Let's break this down. What does an architect do? An architect doesn't start with what exists. He starts with what's possible. He sees beyond the current landscape. He imagines a structure, down to the smallest detail, and then through discipline and iteration, he brings it into existence. Your life is no different. You must begin to see yourself as the designer of your schedule, the engineer of your habits, the author of your decisions. And just like a building, if the foundation is weak, everything will collapse under pressure. That's why the first hour of your day matters. It sets the tone. It programs your emotional state. It signals to your subconscious what kind of life you are building. So start with the phrase, not just out loud, but with feeling. I am the architect of my reality. Say it while visualizing the life you want. Say it while breathing deeply. Say it while taking your first steps into the new day. Let it anchor you. Because most people wake up and immediately hand their power away. They check their phone and begin living in other people's realities. They scroll, compare, react. And by the time they get dressed, Their mood is already under someone else's control. This is no way to build a life. The one who transforms their life understands that the morning is not a time to consume, it's a time to create clarity, direction, focus, and emotion. And when you say, I am the architect of my reality, you are pulling your power back in. You are rejecting randomness. You are refusing to drift. And that single act done daily with consistency begins to reshape how you move through the world. You walk with more intention, you speak with more precision, you act with more integrity, and eventually your external world bends to match the internal command you've been rehearsing every morning. Now here's where it gets powerful. The subconscious mind is always listening. It doesn't judge, it doesn't evaluate, it obeys. And when you feed it with clarity, with direction, with repetition, it begins to adjust your patterns to match. That's why affirmations are not magic. They're mental engineering. But they must be paired with belief, and belief must be paired with behavior. When you say, I am the architect, and then you build your day with structure, with discipline, with intentionality, you prove to your subconscious that you mean it. And once the mind believes it, your behavior becomes automatic. That's when transformation becomes effortless. That's when momentum begins. That's when habits stick and success compounds. Because the inner command has become the outer reality. Let's apply this practically. If you are the architect, what kind of life are you designing? Is it reactive or proactive? Is it accidental or intentional? Is it based on survival or creation? Every morning, repeat the phrase and then follow it with one deliberate action. One behavior that reflects your new role. Maybe it's planning your day instead of winging it. Maybe it's meditating instead of rushing. Maybe it's writing instead of scrolling. Maybe it's choosing gratitude over complaint. The action itself is less important than the consistency, because with each act you reinforce the identity, and identity once solidified overrides mood, distraction, and fear. That's the power of morning repetition. It doesn't just inspire, it installs. I'll give you a challenge. For the next 30 days, before anything else, before breakfast, before your phone, before the chaos, stand up, breathe deep, and repeat the phrase, I am the architect of my reality. Say it like you mean it. Say it until it feels real. And then take one action that aligns. It can be small, it can be simple, but it must be aligned. Do this consistently, and I promise you, your posture will change, your decisions will sharpen, your results will begin to mirror your command. You will begin to notice that opportunities appear, that people respond to you differently, that the fog of indecision lifts, not because the world changed, but because your programming did. Your identity became congruent with your vision, and that congruence creates momentum. Let me end this part by reminding you, nothing changes until identity changes. Strategies come and go, motivation fades. But identity, who you believe yourself to be, determines everything. And that belief is not fixed. It can be reshaped. It can be upgraded. And it starts each morning. In that first moment of stillness, in the silence before the storm, that's where you reclaim your power. That's where you step into your authority. So tomorrow when you wake up, don't drift. Don't delay. Don't defer your power to a future version of you. Take it now. Own it now. Build it now. Stand up and say it. I am the architect of my reality. There is a deep and invisible law at work in your life, whether you recognize it or not. That law is this. What you repeatedly tell yourself becomes what you unconsciously obey. The human mind does not distinguish between truth and repetition. It does not ask if what you're telling it is noble, empowering, or constructive. It simply accepts what is said often enough and then seeks to reinforce it with behavior. This is why the morning is sacred. This is why what you say, what you think, and what you feel in those first waking moments must not be left to chance. Because if you don't deliberately instruct your mind, your past will, your limitations will, your environment will, and before long you'll find yourself living a life not of your choosing, but of your conditioning. That's why the phrase, I am the architect of my reality, matters so much. It is not just a hopeful affirmation, it is a cancellation of old programs. It is a written override of old commands. It is the beginning of a new internal operating system, and the only way that system becomes dominant is through daily repetition. Now let me explain the science that underpins this. Every belief, every habit, every pattern of behavior is reinforced through something called neural pathways. The more you think a thought, the more you say a phrase, the stronger the neural connection becomes in your brain. The brain, seeking efficiency, begins to prefer that path. This is how unconscious habits form, not because they're true, but because they've been practiced. Most people have unconsciously practiced fear, doubt, scarcity, and hesitation for so long that those patterns run automatically. But here's the miracle. You can rewire those pathways. You can install new defaults. And one of the most powerful tools to do that is conscious verbal repetition, especially in the morning when your brain is still in a receptive neuroplastic state. So when you say, "I am the architect of my reality," you're not just speaking to yourself, you're laying new tracks in your brain. You're carving a new path. And with time, repetition, and emotion, that new path becomes the default. It becomes who you are. This is where most people give up. They say the phrase once, maybe twice, and when nothing changes, they assume it doesn't work. But the individual who is serious about transformation understands this principle. Results follow roots, and roots take time to grow. You cannot see them. They grow underground, invisibly. But when nurtured properly, they begin to stabilize and support growth above the surface. The same is true with mental reprogramming. The first few days, maybe even the first few weeks, feel subtle, quiet, almost imperceptible. But beneath the surface, something is happening. A seed has been planted, a root is forming, and if you continue daily, deliberately, with conviction, those roots begin to feed new behaviors, new patterns, new standards, and eventually new results. This is why repetition is not optional, it is required, and the morning is your soil. Let's talk now about emotion. Repetition without emotion is weak. The mind responds most to what is felt, not just what is said. That means when you repeat your morning phrase, "I am the architect of my reality," you must say it with emotion, with energy, with presence. You must connect it to your vision, to your goals, to the version of yourself that you are building. Imagine what your life looks like when this truth is fully installed. Imagine the decisions you make, the posture you carry, the standards you enforce. Feel that, see it clearly, and then speak the phrase from that emotional state. The more you feel it, the more your subconscious will accept it as real. Emotion is the delivery system. It is the glue that binds thought to identity. So do not recite passively, declare boldly. You are not whispering to your future, you are commanding it. Another element that amplifies this process is movement. The body and the mind are connected, and the more you integrate the two, the more powerful your morning ritual becomes. When you say your phrase, do it while walking, while stretching, while breathing deeply. Anchor the words in your physiology. Let your spine reflect the authority of your language. Let your breath support the clarity of your intention. This integration is not just symbolic, it is somatic. It tells the nervous system, this is who we are now, and the more your body believes it, the more your mind will fall in line. Identity is not just a mental construct, it is a physical experience. It lives in how you move, how you stand, how you speak. So train the whole system, not just your thoughts, but your presence. Now let me address something you may be feeling. Doubt. You might be wondering, can this really change my life? And I say absolutely. Not because it's magical, but because it's mathematical. Repetition plus emotion plus action equals identity, and identity determines everything. The person you are becoming is the result of the inputs you accept and the outputs you repeat. If your inputs change, your identity changes. If your identity changes, your outcomes change. And the morning is the leverage point. It is where you get to choose your input deliberately, repeatedly, and powerfully. That's why so few ever transform, because they never protect the morning. But you, if you are still listening, have made a decision, and that decision separates you. That decision makes you dangerous to your old self. That decision makes you aligned with your future. So let's make this practical. Each morning, immediately upon waking, before the noise, before the news, before the world, sit or stand in stillness. Close your eyes, breathe in deeply, and speak with full presence. I am the architect of my reality. I choose my thoughts. I direct my focus. I create my world. Repeat it slowly. Feel it in your chest. Visualize the life it refers to. And then ask yourself one question. What action today would prove this true? Then do that. That is the morning ritual. That is the repetition that reshapes. Not complicated, not mystical, just simple, consistent identity programming. And when practiced daily, it becomes automatic. It becomes who you are. And that, my friend, is when the world begins to change, because you have changed. Let me leave you with this truth. Nothing in your life will shift until your internal story shifts. But stories are malleable. They can be rewritten, they can be reprogrammed, and the morning is the script writing room. Each day, with one phrase, one breath, one choice, you rewrite your script. And if you do it with faith, with structure, and with repetition, you will find that what was once impossible is now inevitable. Not because the world changed, but because you became the architect There is a force inside you more powerful than any circumstance, more potent than any challenge, more enduring than any failure, and that force is your attention. What you give your attention to, you give your energy to. What you give your energy to, you begin to amplify. And what you amplify becomes your reality. This is not philosophy, it is function. It is how your brain, your nervous system, your emotional circuitry are wired to operate. Which means if you learn to direct your attention each morning, deliberately, strategically, you will begin to direct the unfolding of your entire life. That is why the phrase, "I am the architect of my reality," carries so much power. It places attention back where it belongs, under your authority. It shifts you from passive observer to active builder. Because most people, though they don't realize it, are not living, they are reacting. They are not creating, they are repeating. Their attention is being pulled in every direction except forward. But the moment you repeat this phrase with intent and with focus, you are reclaiming the most valuable resource you have, your power to choose where your mind goes next. Every day, life will offer you countless invitations to give away that power. Distractions will disguise themselves as obligations. Fear will masquerade as wisdom. Comfort will whisper that today doesn't matter. But when you've made the decision to direct your attention, you become immune to these illusions. You begin your day with clarity instead of chaos, with decision instead of delay, with direction instead of drift. And this doesn't happen by accident. It happens by declaration, by waking up and speaking your identity aloud. I am the architect of my reality. I choose my thoughts. I direct my focus. I create my world. This is not just a sentence. It is a shield. It protects you from distraction. It reminds you of your standard. It clears the mental fog before it has time to settle. And when you follow this phrase with action, when you begin moving in alignment with the words you've spoken, you become unstoppable. Not because life is easier, but because your focus is stronger than the noise. Let me show you the ripple effect this one decision can create. When you repeat your identity each morning, you begin to see life through a different lens. Opportunities appear, not because they weren't there before, but because you are now calibrated to notice them. Challenges shrink, not because they've changed, but because you are no longer approaching them from fear, but from structure. Your time expands, not because there are more hours in the day, but because your clarity has removed the clutter. This is how transformation works. Not through dramatic events, but through subtle shifts in perception that compound over time. One clear phrase, one disciplined choice. Repeated over and over until your default reaction to life is no longer anxiety, confusion, or procrastination, but presence, direction, and movement. That is the power of attention trained by identity. Now understand this. Attention is not just about what you focus on, it's about what you ignore. The individual who transforms their life doesn't just know where they're going, they know what they're no longer available for. They refuse to entertain thoughts that contradict their vision. They no longer invest in conversations that drain their energy. They do not give emotional access to people who do not respect their boundaries. And this kind of focus doesn't come naturally. It must be chosen, trained, and repeated. The phrase, "I am the architect," is your filter. It reminds you that every yes is a brick, every no is a boundary, and the structure you build today becomes the environment you live in tomorrow. So be deliberate, be selective, say no often, and let your morning ritual be the moment you remind yourself who you are and what you will and will not allow into your mental architecture. This brings us to an essential shift, one that only the few will make. You must stop asking for motivation and start demanding alignment. Motivation is a mood, alignment is a structure. Motivation fades, alignment lasts. When your actions are aligned with your identity, you don't need to feel good to do what needs to be done. You just do it, because it's who you are now. That's what the morning phrase installs. I am the architect of my reality doesn't just motivate, it aligns. It reminds you of your role, your responsibility, your power, and over time that alignment becomes effortless. You'll notice that you no longer debate with yourself about whether or not to show up, you just show up. You no longer waste time explaining your standards to those who don't share them, you just live them, because the architect doesn't wait for permission to build. He draws the plan, sharpens his tools, and begins. And that's what you must do every morning. Begin again with precision and purpose. But let's not mistake simplicity for weakness. This one phrase you repeat is not a soft practice. It is the beginning of mastery. Because mastery is not doing 10,000 different things, it's doing one thing 10,000 times with intention, with clarity, with presence. And when that one thing is repeating your identity, anchoring your attention, and aligning your action, you are walking the same path the greatest builders of history walked. Every inventor, leader, creator, and visionary you admire began with a decision to see life not as it is, but as it could be, and to direct their attention toward that vision until it became real. And now you are doing the same. You are stepping into the same current of power, and the only thing required of you is consistency. Say the phrase, align your action, repeat daily. If you are still here, still listening, still breathing with intention, know this: you are already becoming, already shifting, already installing the patterns that will shape the next season of your life. This is not small work. This is foundational. And in a world that glorifies chaos, drama, and distraction, your commitment to clarity is an act of rebellion. The phrase is your weapon, your tool, your reminder, and you must wield it with reverence, because it's not just changing your morning, it's changing your destiny, quietly, steadily, powerfully. So tomorrow, when the alarm sounds, don't hesitate, don't negotiate. Rise, speak, focus, and move. The world will offer its noise, but you will respond with structure, because you are no longer a passenger in your story. You are the architect of your reality. At some point in your journey, the words you've been repeating, "I am the architect of my reality," will begin to feel different. They won't just be something you say, they'll be something you know, not intellectually, but cellularly. The repetition will have gone deeper than habit. It will have become part of your identity. And when that happens, your world will begin to reflect it, not as a coincidence, but as a consequence. Your thoughts will be sharper, your behavior more precise, your choices more deliberate. Because now you're no longer trying to believe, you do believe. You're no longer hoping the phrase will work, you've become the kind of person who makes it work. And that shift from trying to being is the threshold most never cross. But the few who do, those who persist in repetition and live in alignment, they don't just change their mornings, they change their lives. They don't just say who they are, they prove it every single day. Now you may be wondering, how will I know when that shift has happened? You'll know by the way you respond to resistance. Resistance used to feel like a wall, now it feels like a test. It used to make you retreat, now it makes you refocus. Because the person who repeats, "I am the architect," long enough begins to think like an architect in every situation. They don't panic, they plan. They don't complain, they construct. They don't wait for clarity, they create it. When a problem arises, they don't say, "Why me?" They say, "What's the blueprint for solving this?" This is the sign of transformation. When your identity starts thinking for you, when you no longer have to force behavior because behavior now flows from the new system you've installed. A system based on design, not default. But let's not pretend this process is always clean. Real change is messy. There will be mornings when the phrase feels distant, days when the old identity creeps back in, when the weight of your past feels heavier than the hope of your future. That's normal. That's expected. What matters most is not that you feel perfect. What matters is that you return, that you come back to the phrase, that you stand up even shakily and declare again, "I am the architect of my reality." Because this declaration isn't about how you feel, it's about what you choose. And every time you choose alignment over emotion, principle over reaction, truth over excuse, you're winning. You're laying another brick. And the day will come sooner than you think, when the old identity no longer fits. When going back is no longer an option, because you've built something too strong, too solid, too real to collapse. There's something else that happens once this foundation is strong. You begin to raise others. Your presence becomes instructive. People notice your energy. Not because it's loud, but because it's stable. They see your consistency, your focus, your calm, and they begin to wonder what changed. And that's when your work starts to echo. That's when your transformation becomes a light, not through words, but through example. The architect doesn't boast about the building. He lets it stand. Your new identity won't need validation. It will speak through your posture, your pace, your results. And that's the beauty of mastery. It is quiet but undeniable. When you show up daily in alignment, your life becomes proof. Not opinion, not potential. Proof. Let me make this plain. Your current reality is a reflection of past identity. If you want to change your results, don't chase results, change identity. That's why the morning phrase works. It doesn't fix outcomes, it reshapes the one who creates the outcomes. And once the identity changes, everything else must follow. Goals become targets, habits become rituals, distractions become irrelevant, time becomes a tool, and momentum becomes your natural state. This is the shift from effort to ease, not because the path is easy, but because you are aligned with it. You're no longer walking against your values. You're no longer working around your fears. You're walking straight, clear, and strong. And that strength, it compounds quietly, powerfully, daily. You must understand most people will never do this. Not because they can't, but because they won't stay with it long enough. They want magic. You've chosen mastery. They want quick. You've chosen deep. They want results. You've chosen the route. And that choice will change your life, but only if you continue. Repetition is the path. Structure is the discipline. Identity is the fuel. So keep going. Even when it feels like nothing is changing, keep going. Because what's changing is not just outside you, it's inside you. And once that change is complete, the world will have no choice but to respond. Here's what I want you to do tomorrow. Before the day begins, before the world awakens, return to the sentence, but don't say it like a chant. Say it like a contract. Say it like a leader. Say it like someone who's not hoping anymore but deciding. I am the architect of my reality. Say it with breath, with spine, with stillness. Then act accordingly. Build accordingly. Move accordingly. And let that consistency become your signature. Let your morning become your edge, not for the world to see, but for you to remember. Because the person who wins is not the one who knows the most. It's the one who remembers the truth, first thing in the morning, and lives it before the world distracts them from it. There comes a time in this process when what once felt like effort begins to feel like instinct. When the morning phrase is no longer something you remind yourself to say, it becomes something you feel rising within you before your feet even touch the ground. That's the mark of internalization. That's when identity has rooted itself so deeply into your nervous system that it no longer needs to be manufactured, it simply expresses itself. You begin to live the phrase, you begin to think in alignment without forcing it. You begin to make decisions that reflect the architect's mind, not because you remembered to, but because it has become your default. This is what transformation really is, not a one-time shift, but the gradual replacement of the old self with the chosen self. And each morning declaration was a brushstroke in that painting. Each repetition a layer, each moment of intentional alignment, a reinforcement, until the entire system, thought, emotion, energy, posture, discipline begins to match. You start noticing that the battles you used to fight are no longer yours. The internal arguments, the tug of war between doing what you should and what's easy, begin to fade. Not because life became perfect, but because your decision became permanent. You're no longer deciding who you are every morning. You already know. And so the energy once wasted on indecision is now redirected toward refinement. You're no longer trying to find yourself, you are building yourself, polishing, sharpening, enhancing, because the foundation is no longer in question. And from that place of stability, your work becomes deeper, your focus becomes cleaner, your results become more predictable. You are not pushing anymore, you are pulling outcomes toward you with the gravity of your identity. And that gravity was born each time you said the words and acted accordingly. This is when people start to ask you for advice. They see the change, they see the structure, they sense the consistency, and they want to know how, but they often expect a tactic, a hack, a shortcut. And when you tell them it began with a single phrase, repeated with belief, followed by action, they think you're oversimplifying, but you're not, because you understand that the point was never the phrase, the point was who you became through it. It was the discipline, the congruence, the choice to own the day instead of be owned by it, the choice to speak before the world spoke for you, to decide before circumstances had a chance. And once you live this way long enough, you stop needing validation, you stop needing motivation, you stop needing the world to cheer you on, because you've become self-directed, self-anchored, self-led, and that, more than anything, is the mark of mastery. Let's talk about how this affects your relationships. When you live with internal structure, you stop being a burden on others for emotional stability. You no longer need people to regulate you, to rescue you, to affirm your value. You bring value, you bring stability, you bring clarity into every room you enter, because you've given those things to yourself first. You've programmed your mornings with truth, and now you carry that truth into every interaction. You speak with more precision. You listen with more presence. You lead without posturing. You follow without insecurity. And people feel that. They trust it. Because it's rare. Most people live in internal chaos. But when someone who lives in internal order walks into a room, the room changes. And that kind of presence is earned. It is not faked. It is not performed. It is built. Word by word, action by action, morning by morning. And now the real beauty emerges. Because you've built this structure, you're free to build others. You're no longer trapped in self-management. You've cleared that level. You can now begin to pour into your mission, your vision, your calling. You're not using all your energy to maintain alignment. You are using it to expand, to create, to contribute. That's the gift of discipline. It liberates your energy from chaos and returns it to creation. Most people think freedom is the absence of structure, but you've learned the truth. Freedom is found within structure. The structure you gave yourself when you repeated a simple sentence every morning, and now that internal structure is your launch pad, not your prison, your platform, and you're ready to build outward, bigger, clearer, with more impact. Not because of chance, but because of design. And so now your mornings are no longer just about you. They're about who you serve, who you impact, who you lead, because the world needs builders. The world needs clear, grounded, present people who know how to think, how to act, how to stay steady in the storm, and that is who you have become. Not because of a secret, but because you repeated the truth until it became your truth, until your nervous system believed it, until your decisions reflected it, until your life became evidence of it. This is the fruit of consistency, not a single win, but a changed way of being, a steady rise, a life of depth, of vision, of order. And it all began in the dark, early hours of repetition. So where do you go from here? You keep building, you keep refining, you keep speaking the truth, not because you need to, but because it's who you are. I am the architect of my reality. These are no longer just words, they are the foundation of a life that does not drift, a mind that does not scatter, a will that does not break. They are your compass, your creed, your code, and the longer you live by them, the more natural your leadership becomes, not just over your day, but over your domain, over your purpose, over your future. And that's when you realize the transformation was never about becoming someone new, it was about remembering who you were designed to be all along. By now, you've seen what happens when you choose to live by design, when you rise with intention instead of urgency, when you take back the first moments of the day and use them to declare truth, to speak identity, to anchor your mind. You've seen how one simple sentence repeated with belief and backed with behavior can alter the trajectory of your day, your decisions, and ultimately your life. I am the architect of my reality. That sentence is no longer a phrase, it is a threshold. It marks the line between drifting and designing, between reacting and responding, between being shaped by the world and shaping the world through structure, thought, and direction. And as you cross that threshold day after day, something else emerges, an energy you carry without even trying, the energy of someone who knows where they are going, who doesn't need to prove, impress, or explain because their presence explains everything. That presence is the reward of discipline. You see, this isn't just about building success, it's about building stability. Because what the world needs most is not more performers, not more noise. It needs more men and women who are rooted, who cannot be swayed by opinions, weakened by stress, or controlled by chaos. And that kind of resilience is built in the morning, brick by brick, word by word. When you rise and speak that phrase, you're not just motivating yourself, you're aligning your nervous system, you're telling every part of your being, I am in command. I do not belong to fear, I do not belong to doubt, I belong to purpose, and I will act accordingly. That kind of internal command ripples outward. It changes how you show up at work, how you speak to your family, how you carry yourself in moments of pressure. The world may not know your morning ritual, but it will feel the effects of it in everything you do. By this stage, your repetition has matured. It's no longer a reminder, it's reinforcement. And that reinforcement doesn't just keep you stable, it makes you unstoppable. You start to move through your day with a deep sense of certainty, not because everything is perfect, but because you've trained your system to return to truth. You've built emotional recovery. You've built mental clarity. You've installed patterns that make excellence easier. And here's what you've discovered. Freedom is not the absence of structure, it's the presence of intentional rhythm. You no longer resist discipline because you've tasted what it produces. You've seen how it removes confusion, how it simplifies decisions, how it protects your peace. And now when someone asks how you stay focused, you don't speak in theories, you speak in systems. Because you've lived the process, you've earned the transformation, and that makes you a steward of it. Let's go even deeper. When you take control of your mornings, you take control of your momentum. And momentum is everything. It's what keeps you moving when life gets hard, when results are slow, when emotions are flat. Momentum doesn't come from massive action once, it comes from consistent action daily. And every morning you repeat your declaration, you keep the wheel turning, you remind yourself of the direction, you remove the friction of indecision. You become someone who moves by principle, not pressure, someone who doesn't wait for permission, someone who doesn't need to be told twice. That's rare, that's powerful, that's what allows you to accomplish in months what others take years to even begin. Because you're not wasting time debating your identity, you're executing from it, and that makes you efficient, effective, and almost unrecognizable to who you used to be. Let me tell you something very few people understand. Most of your life is shaped not by what happens, but by what you allow, what you tolerate, what you repeat. And this morning sentence, this small ritual, it reshapes what you allow, it upgrades your tolerance, it elevates your standard, because it forces you to live in alignment with the identity you've chosen. I am the architect of my reality. That's not just something you say, it's something you prove. You prove it when you choose clarity over comfort. You prove it when you prioritize focus over ease. You prove it when you show up without being told. And the more you prove it, the more unbreakable it becomes, until one day you don't have to think about it anymore. You just live it, automatically, consistently, authentically. That's when something sacred happens. You start attracting what matches your new standard. Not because you chased it, but because you became the version of yourself who commands it. The people you meet, the opportunities you recognize, the challenges you overcome, they all shift because your frequency has shifted. You're no longer stuck in the lower loops of life asking why me or what if. You are above the noise, focused on the build, grounded in the vision. And this shift began with a decision, a morning decision, a sentence spoken when no one else was watching, a small private commitment that grew roots in your mind and eventually bore fruit in your reality. This is the hidden power of repetition. It reshapes not just how you think, but who you are becoming. So now you realize the purpose of this morning phrase was never about hype. It was about architecture, about stability, about discipline disguised as language. And the longer you speak it, the more you embody it. The more you embody it, the less you need to force anything, because your very presence becomes a structure, a reminder to others that it's possible to live this way, calm, focused, intentional, unshaken. And in a world built on reaction, you've become a rare exception, a builder of rhythm, of clarity, of self-respect, all because you dared to begin your mornings with one undeniable truth: I am the architect of my reality.